So our news dump this week from Fantasy Flight Games was titled "Conflicts of Rokugan," and in it we learned about the conflict phase, and we also learned about two new phases, the fate and regrouping phases. With the conflict phase, they're going to we didn't really we learned a couple particularly new things, but first going into the new phases. The fate phase, we learned. So you have your dynasty phase, your honor draw phase, your conflict phase in which you fight battles, and then you go into your fate phase. Now, your fate phase is when any characters who have no fate on them are discarded, and if they do have a fate on them, they lose one fate token. So that was something that we pretty much knew before, and we kind of by association have figured it would be its own phase or a part of an upkeep phase like this. But we also learned the new thing that we learned about the fate phase was that you place a fate on any unclaimed rings. So during conflict phase, you choose a rings when you're fighting battles to or fighting conflicts rather to claim effects, right? And after the conflict phase, there may be some unclaimed rings that weren't used to fight in conflicts or claimed by opponents or yourself for that matter. These unclaimed rings gain one fate during the fate phase. And the next time somebody uses or goes to fight a conflict and declares that ring, they will gain that fate token. So this is an interesting. I like this mechanic. Um, but to be honest, I think at this level, it's kind of getting a little next level. Like a little, there's like a lot of decision points. This game is going to be pretty hard. Um, at least the learning curve for this game, I think, is going to be pretty steep. It looks like because you already have your dynasty phase, how to bring out guys, when you should bring out guys, how many fate tokens you should play on the guy, because that's how long he sticks around for. Then there's conflicts and the Temple of Battle, which has always been a big decision point in L5R, and is I would say probably gotten a little more so to a degree. And now you have not only that, but you have what type of claim effects from these rings that you want to use, and because they can affect your opponent too. And now you have this on top of it, so you're adding an economy interest for fighting. Yes, okay, I don't want to claim the void ring if I'm the last one declaring a conflict. Um, so next turn I can claim it and get the initiative and claim it and get the money, for whatever. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that this can be. And certainly we see that they previewed some dragon cards, which I'll go over one of them in a minute. But Dragon's going to be playing very heavily into this mechanic. So it remains to be seen whether or not it's going to be very straightforward, but it seems like there's going to be a lot of thinking. It's a great mechanic. My head's gonna hurt. I can already feel it pounding after 7 hours of playing this in a tournament. So, or 8 hours or where the time would be. So, yeah. The next phase we learn about is the regroup phase. During that, this is after the fate phase, you go to the regroup and you unbow all your characters. So you ready them, I believe is the term they're using, and then you discard any unwanted cards in your province, right? So and this is interesting because there was some debate and questions that I had about whether or not holdings would stick around, be like regions, and just stick into your province, and you wouldn't be able to remove them unless the province was broken, or what would happen to cards in the province, because the province isn't going away, and they said they would still refill. So what happens when a province breaks? And this kind of answers a lot of those questions now. So you can discard holdings and unwanted cards, face up or otherwise, from your province to refill them. And furthermore, when you are in a conflict, the cards that are in the province, like if there's a holding or a face-up card or whatever, then it goes away, right? We'll get a little bit more. The conflict is more the meat of this this news thing. But I think that's really good, and I think you'll actually see a little bit more holdings than I originally anticipated. Because I mean, I was thinking, okay, maybe it'll be like 3 to 6 at the extreme high end 6 holdings, but maybe there'll be actually a little bit more because it looks like there's a little bit more flexibility um, with what you can bring out in some of the cards that they've revealed to us. You can flip cards over, you can flip cards over there in their face down in your province during the dynasty phase. Plus, on top of that, now you can discard unwanted holdings if you don't need it. So you flip it, you use its ability. You don't need it anymore. You get rid of it. Refill it for the next turn. I think that's really great, and it will bring a lot of interesting decisions when building decks, depending on what type of effects that we see for the holdings. Going on, so the main meat of the article was about conflict. We already knew the general structure for conflict. So the idea is that the person with initiative begins and they choose a conflict to they choose whether or not to attack and choose who to attack. And then when they're choosing this, they choose a ring, and that ring has an associated effect for the winner of the battle. All right, whether it be bowing a guy with no fate on him, or drawing a card, or forcing your opponent to discard a card, so forth and etc. This didn't really. It expanded a little bit on it. And particularly, I I don't believe it really stated in the previous article, like the fact you were limited to one military and one political, but I'm pretty sure that's the case here, is that you get one military, one political, which is interesting in its own right because the ability to swing twice for military not being an option means that you have to you have to account for political um, conditions. It's as a matter of defense, but also as a matter of aggression, because you're kind of denying yourself the ability to um, take advantage. There's an opportunity cost if you're not including guys with the ability to fight politically, which means that like clans like Lion are kind of going to be a little handicapped, I would imagine, because they're going to be missing out on one entire attack that they can be launching uh, during their phase. So yeah, they can win that military thing, and they may even be able to include cards to defend against it, but not being able to attack, that's another province that that's going to really make their tempo interesting, different from before, certainly, and interesting in regards to other clans and how they do things. I think clans that will be able to fight in military as well as politicals, like Dragon, for instance, uh, will be a lot stronger overall because they'll be able to keep up. They'll be taking advantage of that ability to aggress on their opponent every turn. So we learn a little bit more about honored and dishonored states in this news dump. We see one of the honored cards. So there's these mini cards that come there, cards smaller than the normal card size, and they are statuses essentially. So we see the honored one in this, and it says when your character is discarded, the controlling player, I believe it's controlling player, but the character's owner gets an honor, which I looked at that and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's insane. So you have clans like Crane, which are probably assumedly are going to be wanting to being able to honor their characters a lot, right? Just like Scorpion will be able to dishonor people a lot. And all right, so they're going to throw out guys. They're going to be attacking, right? In political, at least political combats, if not being able to attack a military combats with their Daidoji or Daidoji. And you're going to be faced with the decision of whether or not to remove these guys to win the battle. And there's a lot of removal cards, but every time I do that, I'm going to be accelerating your win condition. Now, that doesn't. In the old card game, that was the kind of the case when I attacked the Crane player. When I attacked the Crane player, I made the decision. You would wait after they crossed 30 honor, because back in the day you used to win the turn, win if you began the turn with 40. Um, as soon as they crossed 30, though, you would wait 2 turns because if you attacked into them when they were over 30, then they were going to for sure be able to gain 5 honor during a combat, right? And then they were going to, it was going to go to their turn. They're going to bring out their guys, and then they were going to win. Or, there was this moment where you basically had to hold back because you didn't want to accelerate their win condition. Now what they're doing is they're making the most common thing that I'm assuming, this is an assumption, but I think it's a pretty good assumption that Crane is going to be able to do, right? Which is honor their guys. Okay, you remove the guy in a defense or an attack, and now you're accelerating their win condition. So yeah, that's. I mean, it's only in the honor effect that we see is 1. So I mean, I'm assuming that's doesn't change. That's like 1 across the board if you're honored. That there isn't a way to, but there probably will be card effects that play off of honored guys dying. They gain more honor, etc. But yeah, that's pretty strong. I think just as a basic mechanic, that's pretty strong. For especially for honor players. Now, for that doesn't really change too much with the dishonor. I mean, because they also lose honor when they leave play, or I believe it's unhonor is the wording, because we don't actually see the dishonored card yet. But they, that was the kind of the case in the old game too. Like in the old game, when you lost a guy, you lost his personal honor in or his personal honor attribute in honor, right? In family honor. So, um, but still, yeah. So we also learned that the states are conferred by effect. So it's not automatically taken for granted that your guy's honored or dishonored or honored when he enters play. And it used to be all people who weren't dishonored were honorable by default. Now that will actually be an effect that you place on the guy. So yeah, that's pretty good. I like what they're doing with the honored and dishonored. Like again, honor is playing a role in every single decision that you make, regardless of whether or not it's for an honor condition or a dishonor condition. If you're attacking into them, into your opponent, even if they're playing a military deck, you're going to be giving them honor, essentially, if they're honored. And if your guys are dishonored, you'll be losing honor, right? Even if they're not playing Scorpion, that's still going to be a decision. The next thing we learn is about the Imperial Favor. So the Imperial Favor is quite a bit different. In the old game, it used to be this: if you had the highest honor, then you can spend an action to gain it, and then you can discard the favor as in to do different little effects like draw cards and things. In this, at the end of your conflict phase, you take all your readied guys, all your unbowed guys, and add up their glory, and plus any unclaimed or any claimed rings that you have. So if you won 2 battles and you have 2 of these claimed rings out there, then you would add those together, and the person with the highest gains Imperial Favor. Now, when they get the Imperial Favor, they choose whether they want it for military, political reasons. For military, it adds a +1 to your military skill, all your guys' military skill for the next turn while you possess it, and for political, it's +1 to everybody's political skill while you possess it. So that is pretty huge. It's not as strong as it was, or it's not strong in the same way that it was, because in the old edition you could use for drawing cards or removing a guy from battle. So it's a little different, but it creates these sort of like watershed moments. So you're going to be playing your game, I imagine. You're going to sit down, you're going to plan your game, you're going to say, okay, I'm going to, get to this point within 3 turns, right? And you're going to play to that. And then once you've reached the turn before that, right? You're going to try to gain the Imperial Favor. You're going to get these bonus because each point of military skill is essentially a fate that you're saving. Or not each point, but every 2 points, I think. There was an article, by the way, as a side thing, that was posted to the Reddit by I don't remember the name of the author, but about the breakdown of costs, what we've seen so far in personalities versus military or versus skill points, and what basically that is equal to. While and so I mean, there's these the Imperial Favor is essentially giving you fate that you can spend elsewhere. So guys who are ready, who are able to be readied, are going to be extremely potent in a couple ways. One, because you can attack with them and then ready them to gain the favor, right? And then next turn, you can get essentially more force with that guy, right, than you wouldn't normally get, right? Plus, on top of that, he has the ability to ready himself. Bowing itself is going to be a big effect. We see a couple cards that bow people during battles already, which bowing, for those of you who don't know, is the way you use or tap or exhaust your guy, uh, like similar to kneeling in Game of Thrones. So that's yeah, I really like what they're doing with this here because, again, this is playing a turn ahead type of mentality. You need to see where your battle is going to go and create those moments, right? And then next turn push in and go for the win essentially. So my overall impression of the article, there's a lot to discuss with the article, but I figured since so many people were discussing it, I just wanted to give a couple of my particular points. I think it's very much like Game of Thrones. Which is not a bad thing. I love Game of Thrones. I think it's a great game, and it has a lot of good stuff. And it's to be expected because they're going from the same designers. They're all pulling. It's FFG's had this evolution of games and thought you could see since Game of Thrones. They've had this thinking, and they've pretty much used what was good out of other games to improve the games that they're releasing, which I think they're doing that with this. It's not a replica. It's similar enough that I like it, and but it also they're using the what's good out of Game of Thrones, which was heavily based off of L5R. It should be pointed out. It seems pretty heavily based. It has a lot of similarities to the old CCG. That it gives you, uh, it fixes a lot of the issues, and they're taking the good things that they've learned, right? So I don't mind that there's similarities by any means. It's just is what it is. So I think starting to plan, yeah. So planning in this game is going to be a big deal, and it's going to be huge skill to be the ability to be able to flip your cards on your first or second dynasty phase and go, okay, what's going to happen 2 to 3 turns from now? What could happen 2 to 3 turns from now, and plan out your turns accordingly. Or being flexible while you're doing it because you have to respond to your opponent. But that's going to be a huge skill in this, is the ability to go, okay, well, I'm going to, what's he have? What do I have? At the beginning of your dynasty phase, before you've even purchased anything, and then plan out how you're going to purchase your guys, what you're going to draw, how you're going to go into conflict, what they could be holding in their hand, and what they're going to do during the conflict phase, right? To the fate phase. Is that going to give them tempo for the next game? Are they going to gain the favor potentially? Are they going to gain this? Are the unclaimed fate rings that they would want for the next turn going to gain fate, and is that going to increase their tempo? So that's it's going to be a big deal, and people who are at the top tables are definitely going to have my admiration because of the sheer amount of thinking that goes into this game already is pretty astounding. It's going to be definitely a lot of skill to be good at this game. So I'm probably going to be horrible at it. Just letting you know right now. So that brings us to one of the cards. I had a particular concern with one of the cards that they released. There's a lot of great cards. And this card is by no exception. I like the card. So the card is a Togashi Initiate. It's a Dragon Clan personality. And he's a 1 fate, 1 military skill, 1 political skill, 2 glory, monk tattooed. And he has an action. While this character is attacking, spend 1 fate to an unclaimed ring. Honor this character. Now, before I get started on my concern, like I said, this is a great personality. I really like this guy. He's an awesome. He's strong, very strong. My concern comes in with his action. In case you didn't catch that, the wording on his action is while this character is attacking, spend one fate to an unclaimed ring. Spend one fate to an unclaimed ring. As soon as I read this, I saw it. Like, this may be proper English. I'm not sure. I'm not an English professor. But it's definitely awkward wording. And it's very concerning to me. I don't have a. It's not a big deal in and of itself. Like the card, it's very insignificant. Like this one particular card is an insignificant issue, but it's very concerning to me because lately they've been having FFG Fantasy Flight Games has been having these templating issues and having wording issues, not printing certain like words like when effects end, like do they last for the turn or do they um, misprinting art on some things. Like in Netrunner, they had two cards with the same art. They printed like literally the same piece of art. And I think they're going to do a great job with this set. But if this better be like the only instance that this happens. This is I really don't see this wording just doesn't make I don't see how this stuff can happen. What person reads this card spend one fate to an unclaimed ring and doesn't see that. It obviously got missed, right? It should be a cost. Spend one fate. Place one fate on an unclaimed ring, right? You have a cost, you have an effect. It's very clear. And then going forward, right, whenever they're printing effects that are similar to this, they have a template that they can use. This is not a new thing. This Magic has been doing this for years. It's a kind of a basic, I would assume, a basic thing. There is obviously some sort of issue that still they haven't fixed yet, and it's a little distressing. I think the introductory set is going to be great? Yeah, I do. Um, but going into the game, that's like down the road, there could be some misprint similar to this where and it causes all kinds of problems because it does. It can cause some huge issues. And plus, on top of that, is this like I want to see them have enough care and concern to proofread their products before they put them into play. To have proper templating. I don't want them to run into issues. And I get it. They're a big company. They have to. They're juggling a lot of balls here. There's a lot of people wearing a lot of hats. They have to do. They're handing Star Wars license. That can't be easy. That's a huge thing, huge responsibility, and that's got to be totally absorbing a lot of their energy. On top of that, they have this release. This is the first IP that they own. Well, I wouldn't say the first IP, but they have an IP that they own outright that they could do a lot with. That they're really excited might, get be really by the judging of the online community and the excitement, be pretty popular. I just these little issues make a big deal, or are a big deal, and um, I hope they rectify it. I know that they can do it. They make a fantastic product, but this kind of thing does not inspire confidence that there won't be these sort of issues going into this game, and that at some point it's going to become a pretty big issue. So, all right, that ran over. Other than that, yeah, the Dragon Clan. This guy and the other personality or character that we saw was pretty amazing. I'll go over all the cards probably during when we start doing the clan breakdowns. They're probably gonna start releasing this clan. What's this clan about? In their news dumps, they did that with Game of Thrones. So I'll go over all the cards at that point, so we can go over what options there are and stuff like that. But yeah, so that's the conflict and fate and regroup phases. Overall, I think it's some good stuff. Next week they're going to be going into the conflict more in depth, the conflict phase more in depth. And for right now, it's enough. I like learning about the Imperial favor and stuff. Overall, it's a lot of good stuff, a lot of great stuff so far. So